watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Later on in the show, we will talk to Saeed Omar, who is the Alberta Advocacy Officer for the National Council of Canadian Muslims, about a recent National Day of Action for Prison Chaplaincy that they held. But first, some news headlines. Trudeau says government vigilant about Chinese interference. Documentary on missing Uyghur girl comes to the University of Toronto. Imam of Brantford Mosque awarded Ymca Peace Medal. Anwar Ibrahim sworn in as Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister. And now the details. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has given a detailed explanation yesterday of the conversation he had with Chinese President Xi Jinping earlier this month regarding Chinese interference. During question period in the House of Commons, Trudeau responded to questions by saying that the government has been aware of consistent engagements by Chinese government representatives in communities. He says there have been reports of illicit Chinese police stations. Trudeau says that the Canadian government will stay vigilant about these issues, keeping the safety of Canadians at the forefront. Earlier this month, the RCMP reported investigating police stations allegedly set up by Chinese authorities in Canada. As part of Expressions Against Oppression Week, the University of Toronto Student Union is screening the documentary titled In Search of My Sister. The film documents the story of the sister of Rushan Abbas, a Uyghur rights activist. After her sister goes missing, she mobilizes Uyghurs around the world, bringing the human rights abuses in East Turkestan to the media's attention. Jawad Mir, the film's director, and Samir Zubairi, Member of Parliament and Chair of the Subcommittee on International Human Rights, will be there to answer questions from the audience. The event is open to all. The YMCA of Burlington, Hamilton and Brantford marked the 35th anniversary of the YMCA Peace Medal last week by honouring Imam Abu Noman Tariq with the medal at their annual Peace Medal breakfast. Brantford Slavic Full Gospel Church was also awarded the medal. The recipients were awarded the medal for their promotion of tolerance and social justice. Tariq, Imam at the Brantford Mosque and Director of Religious Affairs of the Muslim Association of Brantford, has helped 90 refugee families settle in Canada since 2016. More than 400 people were at the breakfast, the first in-person event since the onset of the pandemic. Malaysia's opposition leader, Anwar Ibrahim, was sworn in as the country's 10th Prime Minister today, following a days-long post-elections deadlock. The swearing-in ceremony took place at Kuala Lumpur's National Palace. Ibrahim was appointed Prime Minister by King Shah. Though Ibrahim's party, Alliance of Hope, has secured the most seats in Parliament in the recent general elections, it is still short of forming a government on its own. It is unclear which party or alliance Ibrahim will choose to form the government. This is a stunning comeback for a man who was jailed in the 1990s by former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad on charges that were widely believed to be politically motivated. And that's it for the news. In 2013, the then Conservative federal government introduced a major change to the way prison chaplains were trained, hired, and supervised. Instead of each faith community assuming responsibility, a single organization was put in charge. IFSA Family Services in Edmonton and the National Council of Canadian Muslims, or Nccm, have investigated the impact of this change on chaplains and the inmates they serve. They argue the change has not been good. This week, they launched a National Day of Action for Prison Chaplaincy. To talk to us about the Day of Action and the issue, we are joined by Saeed Omar, Alberta Advocacy Officer for the Nccm. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Perhaps later on we'll talk a little bit about the issues, but let's start on the advocacy, the National Day of Action. Tell us what was involved.
So the National Day of Action, which we held on Tuesday, is really an opportunity for leaders of Canada's major parties, ministers, and MPs to meet with Canadian Muslims across Canada and to listen to their voices and perspectives on issues that are impacting their communities. This Advocacy Day was focused on federal prison chaplaincy services and the negative consequences associated with the shift to transition the federal prison chaplaincy services into a more private model.
The community often doesn't think about people in prison. Can you tell us what it is that they've been facing and why NCCM and IFSA decided to take this on?
Yes, and that's certainly true. Unfortunately, uh, inmates are one of the most marginalized communities. And effectively, when the transition occurred in 2013 regarding prison chaplaincy services, there was essentially a reduction in quality. So
Mm.
along with inmates being affected and receiving less quality care, prison chaplains were also affected.
Mhm.
So some of the issues we've noticed, and this was largely based on the report authored by Adar Abdulkader, who at the time was working with the Islamic Family and Social Services Association. So
Mm.
relatively right after the transition happened, we've seen and it has been reported that there was a reduction in access to quality spiritual care for minority prisoners,
Mm.
and among other things, there was also reduced resources for minority faith chaplains.
Mhm.
So, for example, after privatization, chaplains lost access to community funds raised by their previous managers and stipends provided by the Correctional Services of Canada. Chaplains used to receive small amounts of excess funding through CSC at the end of the fiscal year to buy books and other materials for programming.
Mm.
After privatization, these stipends were no longer available to chaplains. Now, unfortunately, this affects minority faith groups pretty heavily because when it comes to resources, minority chaplains often rely on their communities to be able to provide these resources to inmates,
Mm.
and having the communities essentially not in the having the community essentially not a part of the process when it comes to prison chaplaincy services. This greatly affects the minority chaplains, to be able to do their job effectively.
I saw in the report, we actually interviewed Adar on the show probably last year. She found some of the women inmates hadn't received a visit from a chaplain for over 2 years. It's hard to understand how something like that can bring about when the move by the government was supposedly to streamline and make things better.
Yes, that's very unfortunate, and I guess I should make it clear. I'm not the contact expert. I'm the advocacy expert.
Mm.
However, yes, according to the report that Adar Abdulkader did author, she had spoken to many minority faith chaplains, specifically Muslim chaplains,
Mm.
and they have told her that they were not, in some cases they were not able to visit a Muslim sister uh, for at least a range of 2 years, and this and this largely has been made possible by the shift in the prison chaplaincy services, because as I understand it, if you don't have at least three or more inmates of the same faith, then under the current guidelines, a federal prison chaplaincy is not required to actually serve those inmates. So, for example, if a prison had one Muslim female, then they would have no chaplains visiting that federal corrections institution.
So the way I've heard you describe it, it seems to be an advocacy. So advocating for the chaplains is also advocating for the inmates. There seems to be an intimate connection between how chaplains, how their work, lost my words, how the chaplains' work style is affecting the inmates. There seems to be a connection. So is that a case that you were making to the MPs that you were meeting with on Tuesday?
Certainly. Certainly, it affects both chaplains, and it directly also affects inmates, because if the chaplains don't have the necessary resources or support to do their job effectively, uh,
Mm.
this by extension directly affect the inmates who are constantly asking to see federal prison chaplains of their faith. So unfortunately, this does affect both chaplains, and this does affect inmates. And all we're saying is, look, clearly the shift that occurred in 2013 is not working anymore.
Mm.
It's been a few years now, and we see that it is not working. So why not go back to a more public model where you have communities directly, local faith communities directly involved in training, hiring, and supporting minority faith chaplains, so that the chaplains can have the resources
Mm.
to be able to do this job effectively. And of
So were
course,
you talking mostly to MPs in Edmonton, or were you talking across Canada? How did
no,
it work?
yes, we were certainly talking to MPs across Canada, from every province, and across all party lines, because we believe this is an issue that all parties can really support.
And what was the reaction? Did you get did it fall on good ears?
Yes, actually, we've received a very, very good reception, because at the end of the day, for this advocacy, I mean, it's not very complicated. All we're saying is, look, chaplains do some of the being a chaplain is really a it's not an easy job.
Mm.
And also for minority faith groups, along with all other faith groups, spirituality is a big part of our religion. So
Mm.
we're saying, look, why not make this system work for everybody? And this is something everybody can agree on.
And there's going to be an election soon, and who knows what will happen. But if the Conservative Party gets back in, and they were the ones who introduced this in the future, have you done any kind of forward thinking about how federal politics might impact your advocacy?
Yes, definitely. I mean, you're absolutely right. There's always a concern with the change in parties, um, that it may become more difficult. But however, I believe, because we have also been engaging also with conservative MPs, and then there's actually a lot of MPs that actually care about this issue. So I believe that even if the parties do change, I believe we still have a very good chance of addressing this issue.
Hmm. One of the things that struck me as I was looking into this again for today's interview was the change was made by the Conservatives in 2013. Now, that's almost 10 years ago. So is it the case that groups have only started noticing just recently what's happened, or the impact in the beginning was fine and now it got worse over time, or this is 10 years? Can you sort of talk to that?
Yes, actually, at the time, it was a very when the transition happened in 2013. It was actually very controversial decision. You
Mm.
actually had many, along with MPs speaking out on the issue at the time. You actually had many chaplains of all faith groups actually speaking out at the time, and coming together on this
Mm.
issue. So actually, this has been an issue for a long time. But now that it's been 10 years, now that the data is out there, and now that we see how essentially this system has not been working,
Mm.
I think we just really need to kind of unite communities, and different communities of different faith groups, just to really speak out on this issue more. So throughout the years, there's definitely been also other faith communities, minority faith communities, who have actually spoken out about this issue. So we're just essentially, we want to ensure that, as a Muslim community, we also speak out on this issue, because this does heavily affect our community as well.
Well, thank you very much for joining us to explain. We don't have a lot of time to go into all the details, but thank you for giving us this brief glimpse.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe, and God bless.